A lot of people have decided to run their mouths about musicals despite not knowing much about musicals. All these reviews slating Cats, and not one of you brought up the straight washing? Hi everyone, it's LadyJenevia. I feel like I'm fashionably late to this party we seem to be having here on YouTube where everyone and their mum is dragging the Cats film. Considering how little money this has made at the box office, I'm skeptical as to how many of you have actually seen it. My recommendations section over the last month has been spammed with everyone's Cats reviews, and they're all saying the same thing. The CGI is ugly, the story doesn't make sense, why is everything so salacious? I love musicals. I grew up watching many of them. There was a lot of Rodgers and Hammerstein, a lot of Gene Kelly, and some Disney thrown into the mix as well. If I were to ever meet Dame Julie Andrews, I can assure you that I would make Jennifer Garner's fangirl freakout look like amateur hour. One of the musicals that I grew up watching was in fact Cats. It was the 1998 direct-to-video stage production, which was filmed for the purpose of mass distribution to those that would want to be able to watch the musical in the comfort of their own home. Therefore, I've grown up quite familiar with the musical and its many eccentricities, so I feel like I can offer a different perspective on the way that this film adaptation has turned out. One of my Scottish viewers had actually messaged me and suggested that I do a video on Cats, and initially I thought, well, no, what is the point of me doing that when everyone is already talking about it? But once I started to actually watch a lot of these reviews, they were just all saying the same thing over and over again, and there was a lot that was not being addressed. It's just the same talking points being repeated over and over again. And even the most basic historical context to do with the origins of this musical are often being omitted from discussion, so that's when I realized that not only can I talk about this film, I can turn this into a teachable moment. In today's culture, there's a really nasty subsection of consumers that take pleasure in the failure of giant films, without much consideration for how hard people have worked to try to make them into something great. No one who makes these films wants them to fail, but there's no denying that this film adaptation of the musical Cats did. Let's explore why. I'm going to address 3 main points of where the film went wrong and offer up alternatives that might have helped it win over more viewers than it actually did. The points are as follows: how it looks, how it sounds, and how it's understood, or more importantly, the fact that it wasn't understood. Just so we're clear here, there are other things that I could nitpick that fall outside of these points, but this is just the easiest way to organize my main feedback of this adaptation. Ever since the first trailer dropped, people have been making fun of how it looks. The people in charge of this film made the very bizarre choice to do CGI Cats, despite the fact that Cats is one of the longest running musicals ever, and has been done over and over again for decades with different creative approaches to making cat costumes and designing cat makeup. Why are you trying to fix what isn't broken? You don't even need to see the musical live to get a sense of how to make the cats look. You can watch the 1998 direct-to-video production and see these truly brilliant looks that the makeup artists have made. When the stage production was filmed for the purpose of releasing it to the masses, they even talked behind the scenes about how great of an opportunity it was for the audience to see these characters up close in a way that they would not be able to if they were only seeing the show live in a theater. This is precisely what's unique about filmmaking as an artistic medium compared to live theater. This is not about one form of art being inherently better than the other. They do different things. So a film adaptation intended for release in cinemas has that same opportunity to allow the audience to get to know these cats better, and more importantly, you are getting up close to these characters, so they need to look good. I was probably one of the only people that went into this film hoping that I would enjoy it. Conversely, a lot of the other people that seem to have bought tickets to it went in with the expectation that they were going to hate it. I like the musical, just as I like many other musicals. I love what that genre has to offer. I was ready for big songs and elaborate dance numbers, and instead I was completely taken aback by how ugly it looked. And it was so ugly that that ugliness was distracting me the entire time from connecting to the story and the characters. And yes, even the songs and dance numbers. You had a $90 million budget and far too much of it went to an entirely unnecessary expense. That doesn't mean that costumes and makeup won't cost money. You still have to hire those artists, but it would have been much better to have your VFX artists focusing their work on the other visual elements of the world building around the cats and the overall look of the film. It should be a feast for the eyes. You've got these faces that look too human, and that is why everyone is talking about the uncanny valley. The most significant problems are the noses and the ears. You needed to paint these faces properly with cat makeup, and the ear problem doesn't really exist in the stage production I grew up watching because the vast majority of these cats have these tufts of fur that frame the face and hide the human ears that exist on the side of human faces, and overall enhance the illusion of a cat face where the ears are on top of the head.
Oh, when you let me in, then I want to go out.
Now, I don't know the exact financial breakdown of how much was spent on CGI out of this $90 million budget, but I have to believe that it would have been overall better for the budget to focus the expenses on hiring makeup artists and costume designers, and I'm presuming that would have saved a bit of money that would have then been used elsewhere, which is what I'm going to talk about in this section. With whatever money you would have saved by not overspending on completely unnecessary CGI, you should have instead used to hire a full orchestra to record this soundtrack. The mixing and the instrumentation was so unpleasant to listen to. The instrumentation made the songs sound like cheap demo tracks, not the soundtrack to a big studio film adaptation of one of the most successful musicals of all time. There are also some casting choices I disagreed with because of the lack of vocal capabilities to carry the songs being sung.
The cavity's a mystery cat. The cavity, the cavity.
But what's unreal about the vocals in this musical is that even Jennifer Hudson and Jason Derulo, both of whom we all know can sing, didn't sound that good. I don't know what sort of direction they were being given about how to sing these songs, if they were being pushed to go for something more exaggerated, like a character-driven way of singing, as opposed to prioritizing actually sounding good. But despite the fact that this was a stage musical first, this is a film adaptation of said musical, and you would have been much better off letting them sing to their best capabilities of serving big, soulful vocals.
Jellicle cats have cheerful faces.
This is where we get to the root of the problem on a storytelling level. There are a lot of people that have complained when reviewing Cats about how the story doesn't make sense. The musical has always had a very peculiar story. If you are such a professional film critic, it would have taken you all of 3 seconds to Google the basic premise and origins of this musical. This is not even about you understanding the entire story in depth. We're talking about the basic premise. The Cats musical was created by Andrew Lloyd Webber when he took on the personal creative challenge of turning T.S. Eliot's collection of poems, entitled Old Possum's Practical Cats, into songs. This is why the lyrics are a bit peculiar, and there are so many songs that are focused on introducing the audience to individual cat characters. It wasn't until after Andrew Lloyd Webber started writing these songs that the decision was made to compile them into a musical. There is a larger story about a cat cult holding a talent show to pick someone to be sacrificed and be reborn, which is admittedly peculiar, but I've done some brainstorming about how this story could have been better presented to an audience unfamiliar with the source material. Being that this is a story that originates from a book of poetry, this is important context that I think would have really helped the audience in not only the film itself, but even the marketing when designing the trailers. There's 2 versions of the solution that I came up with to help to introduce the audience to the world of Cats. The first one is you could have a narrator, British obviously, introducing at the very beginning of the film the world of Cats as a fairy tale of sorts, and being that fairy tales often come from old books, you would have an actual storybook presented and pages turning with previews of the poems and the characters that will be introduced throughout the musical in their respective songs. Right as this opening dialogue wraps up, the audience gets thrown into the book and then the musical plays out. You can also include various page-turning effects for scene transitions and a way of keeping the audience in that mindset that they are inside of a storybook, even if it is a storybook about cat poems. Another alternative to having a narrator doing an opening and closing monologue is to Princess Bride it, and what I mean by this is you have an older character that serves as the narrator talking to a young child, which is something that we saw in The Princess Bride, but that is not the only film that has utilized that type of storytelling technique. We also saw that in Edward Scissorhands, where Winona Ryder's character, Kim, is telling her granddaughter about the story of Edward and his origins and what happened on the journey that they took together of meeting and falling in love. Keep in mind that when they did that, there's a lot of things you see in Edward's story that realistically Kim would not know as the narrator, but fixating on that is just nitpicking for the sake of it. I'm just making the point that this is a recurring style used in filmmaking and storytelling. The purpose of these narrators is to not only introduce the audience to these strange new worlds, but to also offer those closing remarks that basically summarize the main takeaways of that story. I refuse to believe that Cats as a feature film adaptation was doomed from the start. It's weird, surreal, and abstract, but do you know what else can be described by all those words? The Lighthouse. And there are plenty of people, especially on film Twitter, that love that film. I'll tell you right now, I did not connect emotionally to either one of those characters, not Robert Pattinson, not Willem Dafoe, but do you know who I have connected to over the course of my life? Grizabella the Glamour Cat. And I'm not making this point to slate The Lighthouse or to even claim that The Lighthouse was not as good of a film as Cats, because that is not the case, at least not from my opinion. The point I'm trying to make here is that there is room, and should be room, for weirder stories, weirder films, weirder art. Things that are a little bit more out there, things that are not as easily spoon-fed to a larger audience. Loads of people love The Lighthouse, and loads of people love Cats the musical. If that was not the case, it would not be one of the longest running musicals of all time. That more or less wraps up a lot of the points that I wanted to make about this film adaptation of Cats the musical. Was it a great adaptation? No. But I also tend to feel that way about virtually anyone and everyone that tries to play Rum Tum Tugger that isn't John Partridge. And for those that are wondering about my opening comments regarding the film adaptation straight washing the musical, I will explain that right now. Everyone who is familiar with this musical knows that there is some tension between Rum Tum Tugger and Magical Mr. Mistopheles. Was that tension present in the film adaptation? No, it was not. I'm sorry, did I accidentally buy a ticket to the Star Wars sequel trilogy? Because I didn't know that we were just going to blatantly ignore romantic tension between two male characters. To wrap things up, I do recommend that you watch Cats the musical, or at the very least, the 1998 direct-to-video adaptation. If you would like a more thorough breakdown of the musical as far as the story and characters go, there is a video by Caitlin Coy that is about half an hour long, and it is so fantastic in covering this that I am so happy that it exists so that I do not have to painstakingly go back and explain what the story and characters are really all about. Comment down below any opinions you have about Cats the musical, Cats the film adaptation, or really any other musicals that you would like for me to cover. Believe me, I am looking for any excuse to do more videos about musicals. There are many that I grew up loving that now I would love to fight. And there are many that I grew up loving and still adore to this day. If you follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen me ranting about various opinions that I have about a wide array of musicals. Clearly, it's a topic that I have a lot of opinions on. As a matter of fact, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd and Vero. See you in the next one. Meow.